Locked away like a wild beast, the giant widow endured the fearful stares and the stones hurled at her cage. She waited, weeping in silence, until a solitary Apache warrior saw her. With every last cent he had, he bought her freedom. And then he shocked the whole world by asking, "Will you marry me?" The desert wind of Sonora whistled through the rotting beams of the traveling circus. It carried the stench of sweat and dust, a smell so constant it felt like breathing. Maria woke as she did every morning, her shoulders aching against the low ceiling of her prison. Her height, over 8 feet tall, forced her to sleep curled like a child, knees pressed to her chest. The straw mattress groaned under her weight. She had learned to stay perfectly still for hours, staring at the rotted wood above her, listening to the circus come alive. First the horses, then the workers, and finally the cruel laughter of Don Teodoro as he counted his coins. "The cursed giantess!" he'd bellow. "Come see the woman who killed her own man with her devilish hands." Maria clenched her fists. 3 years of hearing those words, and they still cut like a knife. Santiago was never her man. He was just a handler who saw her as a monster of burden, strong enough to haul heavy loads without rest. That night, he'd been drunk, more violent than usual. He had raised his hand to her. Maria had only defended herself, a simple shove, nothing more. But her strength was that of 3 men. Santiago fell. He fell badly. The memory always ended with the same dry snap, like a branch breaking in the wind. And just like that, her life was over. 4 reals to witness the most terrifying spectacle in the world. The crowd drew closer. Maria sat up, her massive hands trembling as she tried to fix her hair with a shred of dignity. The show was about to begin. The first stone struck the bars of her cage with a loud clang that echoed in her chest. More followed, along with the jeers. "Look at the size of that thing. Is she even a woman? They say she can split a man in half." Maria kept her head bowed. She had learned that any reaction only fueled their cruelty. Silence was her only shield. "Now, ladies and gentlemen," Don Teodoro's voice boomed, "observe how this creature pretends to be human." He approached with a long stick, poking at her as if she were a zoo animal. "Stand up! Show them how big you are!" Maria lifted her gaze. Her eyes met those of a small girl in her mother's arms. The child wasn't afraid, only curious. For a single heartbeat, Maria felt a flicker of hope. But the mother turned away, whispering about monsters and curses. Hope died just as fast as it was born. The show lasted for 2 long hours. When it was over, Don Teodoro waddled over, counting his take. "A good day," he muttered. "People will always pay to see freaks like you." He left her the usual ration, hard bread, a bowl of water, and cold beans. She ate slowly. It was the one part of her day she controlled. As she chewed, her mother's words came back to her. "My daughter, God made you different for a reason. One day you'll understand why." But her mother had died. Her family had cast her out. Every job had ended in fearful looks and whispers. "Why?" she whispered into the empty tent. "Why did you make me like this?" The wind rattled the old circus wood, but there was no answer. There was never an answer. Far away, in the hills surrounding the town, a man named Tonatu watched smoke curl from the chimneys below. At 51, he was an Apache warrior who had lost everything he loved. He had built his ranch where he could see the town without being seen. He lived on the border between 2 worlds and belonged to neither. He saw the circus caravan arrive, but he didn't go down. He had no interest in the white man's amusements, but on the 4th day the wind carried a different sound. Not laughter, not awe. It was the muffled cry of someone suffering in silence. A sound so faint, only a man who knew the desert's secrets could hear it. He moved on foot, silent as a shadow, and what he saw stole his breath. In the center of the tent was a cage, and inside, hunched like a wounded animal, was the largest woman he had ever seen. But it wasn't her size that struck him. It was the way she held herself. The desperate stillness of someone who had learned that any movement meant pain. He knew that posture. He had seen it in prisoners of war. He had felt it himself after his wife, Itel, had died. "Come see the cursed giantess!" the circus owner shrieked. "The woman who killed her own husband!" The crowd laughed. They threw stones. The woman didn't flinch. She just shrank further into herself. Tonatu felt a fury he hadn't known in years, not the hot rage of battle, a colder, deadlier fury. He saw her silent dignity, her suffering. He saw another soul like his own, someone who had lost everything, judged for something they couldn't control. He watched until the crowd left. He watched her eat her meager meal. He watched her curl up on the straw, too large for her own prison. That night, he couldn't sleep. The elders had taught him that a warrior's worth wasn't measured by the enemies he killed, but by the lost souls he helped find their way. For 10 years, he had forgotten that. But under the stars, he remembered who he was. Not just a warrior, a protector. At dawn, he saddled his horse. He rode down from the hills with a leather pouch, heavy with all the silver he had saved. He had never known why he was saving it. Until now. Don Teodoro was counting his money when Tonatu approached. The Apache moved like a predator, his black eyes locking onto the circus owner with an intensity that made the man shiver. "I've come to talk business," Tonatu said, his voice calm. He placed the heavy pouch on the table. The clink of silver was unmistakable. "I want to buy the woman." Don Teodoro stared. "The woman is not for sale. She is my main attraction." "Everything has a price," Tonatu said. The finality in his words froze the circus owner. He opened the pouch. His eyes widened. It was more silver than he'd seen in years. "Why?" he stammered. "What do you want with her?" For the first time, something like emotion crossed Tonatu's face. "To free her." Don Teodoro laughed nervously. "She's a murderer. Dangerous. You can't just—" "Were you there?" Tonatu interrupted. "Did you see what happened?" The question cut the laughter short. Don Teodoro looked at the silver. It was a fortune. "Fine," he said at last. "But I want her gone. Immediately." Tonatu gave a single nod and walked toward the tent. Maria was curled in the corner of her cage. She stiffened as they approached. "Maria," Don Teodoro said, "this man wishes to take you with him." She lifted her head. Her eyes met the tall stranger's, and something passed between them. Not recognition, something deeper. It was as if two wounded souls had found each other across a crowded room. "Take me where?" Maria asked, her voice rough from disuse. "Far from here," Tonatu replied, "to a place where you can live in peace." She studied him. Years of hardship had taught her to read people. In his eyes, she saw no deception, no pity. She saw respect. "Why?" she asked. He hesitated. "Because everyone deserves to be free." Don Teodoro unlocked the cage. The door swung wide. For 3 years, Maria had dreamed of this moment. Now that it was here, she couldn't move. "Come," Tonatu said gently, extending a large, scarred hand. "You are free now." She looked at his hand. It didn't tremble. It didn't show disgust. Slowly, Maria reached out her own massive hand and touched his fingers. The contact was electric, her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You are free now," he repeated. And in those 4 words, Maria felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders. But as she stepped out of the cage, she saw something in Don Teodoro's eyes. It wasn't relief. It was fear. A deep, unsettling fear. And she realized this wasn't just about money. The circus owner was afraid of what she knew. But what secret was so terrible he would keep a woman in a cage for 3 years to protect it? The journey to the mountains was a silent one. Maria rode behind Tonatu, feeling the strain of her weight on the horse. I weigh too much, she murmured. I should walk. The horse is fine, Tonatu said without turning. You need rest. It was their first real conversation. The air grew cooler as they climbed, scented with pine and damp earth. Maria breathed it in, feeling her lungs expand for the first time in years. At a stream, she asked his name. Tonatu, he said. It means sun in Nahuatl, she replied, surprising him. My grandmother was Purhepeca. She taught me. She looked down at her hands. My name is Maria Xochitl. It means flower. She gave a bitter little laugh. My mother hoped I would be beautiful. Your mother was wrong, he said. The words were simple, a statement of fact from a man who didn't deal in lies. It stole her breath. They reached his ranch at sunset. It was a sturdy house of wood and stone, with ceilings high enough for her to stand tall. Wildflowers grew around the porch. It's beautiful, she said. It was my wife's, he replied, and the grief in his voice was a wall she knew not to cross. He showed her to a room. It was hers, he said, for as long as she wished to stay. That night, for the first time in 3 years, Maria bathed in hot water. Tonatu had heated it for her, left her clean soap and soft towels. As she sank into the water, she finally wept. She wept for the stolen years, for the humiliation, for Santiago's death that had defined her. But she also wept with relief. For a door she could close. For a man who had said, "You are free," and meant it. Clean clothes were waiting for her. A simple cotton skirt and blouse. They were too big, but they were a woman's clothes, not a spectacle's. She dressed slowly, marveling at the feel of clean fabric on clean skin. In the kitchen, Tonatu was cooking. The smell of warm tortillas and seasoned beans filled the air. Are you hungry? He asked. It was a simple question, but no one had asked her what she wanted in 3 years. Yes, she said at last. I am hungry. They ate at a small table. My wife taught me to cook, he said. She said a man who can't feed himself can't care for anyone else. She was wise. Yes, he said. She was. That night, Maria lay in a real bed, large enough to stretch out in, and stared at the stars. She had never known such peace was possible. But as she drifted to sleep, a question nagged at her. Why had Don Teodoro been so afraid? What secret did he think she knew? A secret worth 300 silver pesos to keep quiet. She was free from the cage, but she had a feeling she had just walked into a much larger and much more dangerous mystery. The first weeks were an exercise in learning how to be human again. What unsettled Maria most was kindness. Tonatu asked for nothing. He treated her with a simple respect she didn't know how to accept. She found her solace in the garden. The same hands Don Teodoro had called diabolical were surprisingly gentle with plants. The soil seemed to welcome her touch. The corn grew taller, the beans ripened, the squash swelled. You have a gift, Tonatu said one day. My grandmother taught me, she answered, before the world decided she was a monster. One morning visitors arrived. An older Apache woman, a scarred warrior, and a young girl. Maria rose to her full height, bracing for the usual fear and whispers. But the elder woman just nodded. So this is the woman Tonatu saved, she said in flawless Spanish. I am Citlali, healer of our people. This is my son, Nahuatl, and my granddaughter, Itel. Itel, Maria repeated. The name was a phantom pain in her chest. It had been Tonatu's wife's name. The young girl smiled shyly. It means star in Nahuatl. Citlali's sharp eyes scanned the garden. Do you know the medicinal properties of these plants? She asked, catching Maria completely off guard. The cumin is for digestion, the chamomile for sleep. Did you do this on purpose? My grandmother said certain plants grew better together, Maria stammered. I didn't know they were medicine. Citlali smiled. Every garden is medicine, if you know how to see it. Would you like to learn? And so Maria's true healing began. Sitlali came 3 times a week, teaching her the sacred knowledge of the plants. The ability to make plants grow, the old woman said, is a gift from the earth itself. A gift, Maria whispered. People have always called me a curse. Sitlali's eyes were sharp. Child, have you ever seen a mountain apologize for being tall? Or a river beg forgiveness for being deep? Then why should you apologize for being as the earth made you? The words struck a hidden place inside Maria. Etel began visiting, too, full of questions about the outside world. My grandmother says true family is chosen, not born, the girl told her one day. She says you are wise, that someone who has suffered so much and can still be gentle with plants must carry wisdom in her soul. Maria's garden expanded. She created new sections for treating fevers, wounds, and anxiety. Word of her gift spread through the Apache community. Mothers brought sick children, and Maria found she had a special touch with them. Her great size, which had always caused fear, now seemed to comfort them. But not everyone accepted her. Some of the younger warriors muttered that she was unnatural, a bad omen. The familiar sting of rejection returned, but this time it was different. Sitlali had armed her with a new kind of strength. The real test came during a storm. A 4-year-old girl named Paloma wandered into the woods and got lost. The tribe was frantic. Let me search, Maria said. I am strong, I am large, I can go where others cannot. She stepped into the raging storm. For hours she pushed through tangled brush and waded through swollen streams. Her size, so long a curse, was now a blessing. She found the little girl huddled under a fallen tree, shivering and terrified. Maria wrapped the child in her own shawl and lifted her into her arms. You're soft, Paloma murmured, relaxing against her chest. And you smell like flowers. Monsters don't smell like flowers. When she returned to the village, the tribe celebrated. Sitlali stood before them all. This woman has shown the heart of a true Apache. She risked her life for one of our own. The warriors who had once scorned her now bowed their heads in respect. Tears streamed down Maria's face, not of pain, but of belonging. Later, by the fire, Tonatu asked her how she felt. Like I have finally found my home, she whispered. But just as she felt safe, the past came riding back. A rider from the nearest town brought a message for Tonatu. It was from the territorial marshal. Don Teodoro, the circus owner, had been found dead, murdered. And the last person to see him alive was a silent Apache warrior who had paid a fortune in silver for his prized freak. Tonatu was now a wanted man, and Maria was the only one who knew he was innocent. But proving it would mean facing the world that had tried to destroy her, the world she had just escaped. Tonatu read the marshal's summons, his face a mask of stone. They say Don Teodoro was found with his throat cut, he said, his voice low and grim. The last man seen with him was an Apache warrior carrying a bag of silver. They think it was you, Maria breathed, her blood turning to ice. It is an easy story for them to believe, he said, the old bitterness creeping back into his voice. An Indian and a dead white man. The verdict is already decided. But you didn't do it. How do you know? He asked, his dark eyes searching hers. Because I know you, she said simply. The trust between them was a solid thing, built in silent understanding over months. You save the wounded, you don't kill the defeated. He gave a single sharp nod. I will ride down. I will speak to this marshal. They won't listen, Maria cried, grabbing his arm. The strength in her hand made him pause. They will see your face, hear your accent, and they will see a killer. Let me come with you. No, he said, his voice firm. It is too dangerous for you. They will twist your words. They will put you back in a cage. Then we will find the real killer, she insisted. Don Teodoro was afraid of me that day, afraid of something I knew. Santiago. He worked for Teodoro. He was cruel, but he wasn't a fool. He once boasted that he and Teodoro had a secret, something that would make them rich. A new light entered Tonatu's eyes. What secret? I don't know, but I think it's the reason I was kept in that cage. It's the reason Teodoro took your silver so quickly. He wasn't selling me. He was trying to buy my silence. Suddenly, the pieces started to fit together. Her healing knowledge, the plants. My grandmother, Maria whispered, her mind racing. She was a great healer. She knew of plants that were rare, valuable, plants that only grow in these mountains. She made maps. Tonatu's face hardened with understanding. And Teodoro knew you were her granddaughter. He must have, Maria said. Santiago must have told him. They weren't just running a circus. They were searching for something, and they thought I was the key. This changed everything. This wasn't just about a murder. It was about a conspiracy. Don Teodoro had partners who would still be looking for what he was after, partners who would have wanted him dead to keep the secret and the profits for themselves. We have to go, Maria said, her voice firm, not just to clear your name, but to find out what they killed my grandmother's legacy for. They rode down from the mountains, not as a warrior and a victim, but as partners. In the town, the atmosphere was poisonous. The townsfolk stared at Tonatu with open hostility. Maria, walking beside him, felt the familiar sting of their judgment, but this time, she didn't flinch. She stood to her full height, her presence a silent challenge. The marshal was a hard man, but fair. He listened to their story, his eyes moving from Tonatu's stoic face to Maria's earnest one. It's a fantastic tale, he said, unconvinced. A giantess, a murdered circus owner, a secret map to a miracle plant. Sounds like something out of a penny dreadful. It's the truth, Maria insisted. Check Teodoro's belongings, look for letters, for maps. You will see. The marshal hesitated. All right, he said. I'll look. But until I find something, you, he said, pointing at Tonatu, are under arrest for the murder of Don Teodoro. As they led Tonatu to a cell, Maria felt a surge of helpless fury. But as the iron door clanged shut, Tonatu looked at her, and his eyes conveyed a single, urgent message. Find the proof. Maria knew what she had to do. She went back to the circus, now a ghost of its former self, the workers packing up to leave. She found the wagon where Santiago had slept. It was a filthy, cramped space. But under a loose floorboard, she found it. A small, leather-bound book. It was her grandmother's journal. Inside were drawings of plants, descriptions of their healing properties, and maps of the mountains. And on the last page, a new entry, written in Santiago's crude scrawl. He had been following her grandmother for years. He had stolen her journal after she died. He wrote of a single plant, the sunstone flower, said to cure any illness. A plant so rare it was worth more than gold. And the map to its hidden location was woven into a traditional Apache wedding blanket. The final piece clicked into place. Citlali, the Apache healer. She had a collection of old blankets. She had been the one to welcome Maria, to teach her. But was it friendship, or was she watching her? Just as Maria was about to leave the wagon, a shadow fell across the door. It was Nahuatl, Citlali's son. His face was not friendly. "The old woman sent me," he said, his hand on the knife at his belt. "She said you would find what belongs to us." The betrayal was a sharp, cold blade in her gut. Citlali wasn't her friend. She was a guardian of the secret, and she had been using Maria all along. Nahuatl lunged for the journal, but Maria was faster. Her massive hand closed around his wrist, stopping him cold. "This is my family's legacy," she growled, her voice a low thunder. "Not yours!" The fight was short and brutal. Maria's strength, born of a life of hardship, was overwhelming. She disarmed him easily. "Tell me everything," she commanded. Nahuatl, his arm pinned behind his back, confessed. Tsitlali had known about the sunstone flower for years. She had made a deal with Don Teodoro, promising to lead him to it in exchange for a share of the profits. Santiago was their go-between, but when Teodoro got greedy and tried to cut them out, Tsitlali had him killed. She had sent Nahuatl to retrieve the journal, the final key. "She never trusted the white men," Nahuatl spat. "She was just using them to find the blanket." The wedding blanket. A chill went through Maria. The blanket was a sacred object, only brought out for weddings. It was decorated with flowers. The map was hidden in plain sight. She knew where it would be. The next day was Itel's wedding. Maria raced back to the marshal, the journal in her hand. "Here is your proof," she said. "Tonatu is innocent. The killer is Tsitlali, and she's about to make her move." They rode for the Apache village, arriving just as the wedding ceremony was beginning. Itel stood before the tribe, radiant in her wedding dress, and behind her, serving as the ceremonial backdrop, was a beautiful ancient blanket, its pattern a complex tapestry of flowers. The sunstone flower was woven into the center. As the marshal and his men surrounded the village, Maria walked forward. Tsitlali saw her and her face hardened. "You!" she hissed. "It's over," Maria said, her voice ringing with authority. "Your secrets are out." Tsitlali tried to run, to grab the blanket, but it was too late. The tribe, hearing of her betrayal from the marshal, turned on her. They would deal with their own justice. Tonatu was released. As he walked out of the jail, a free man, Maria was waiting. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. He simply took her hand, his scarred fingers lacing through hers. The sunstone flower was found, its location revealed by the blanket's map. The tribe declared it sacred, to be protected, its healing properties to be used only for the good of all people, not for profit. Maria, as the last descendant of the great healer, was named its official guardian. Years later, Maria sat on the porch of their ranch, Tonatu beside her. In her lap was their son, a strong, healthy boy with his father's dark eyes. Her hands, once a source of shame, now rested on her child's head, a symbol of protection and love. She was no longer the cursed giantess. She was Maria Xochitl, the flower of the mountains, a healer, a wife, a mother. Her mother's words came back to her one last time. God made you different for a reason. She looked at her husband, at her son, at the peaceful mountains that were her home. "I think," she whispered to the wind, "I finally understand why." If you enjoyed this story of a love that healed all wounds, please consider subscribing to our channel. Every week, we bring you tales of the American West, where courage, heart, and the human spirit triumph against all odds. What was your favorite part of Maria and Tonatu's journey? Let us know in the comments below. We love hearing from you.